Hi everyone. So we have a massive problem hidden in our success. On paper, we are living longer than ever before, but the data shows something uncomfortable. Our health is not keeping up with our years. Right now, there is nearly a 10-year gap between how long the average person lives and how long they actually stay active and independent. That's a decade of chronic disease and functional loss that we have just accepted as a quote normal aging, but it does not have to be. Now, if you've been online at all lately, you have noticed that the quote longevity topic has exploded. It moved from the niche academic circles into the mainstream. But I'm not interested in doing a 4-hour episode that's just the basic, eat the whole foods and walk more. Those are foundational, but they don't truly answer what people are actually experiencing as they age. We are entering an era where we can finally ask, okay, so if cardiovascular disease, cancer, and memory loss all arise with aging, then why are we only playing whack-a-mole at the disease level? Why aren't we targeting the biology of aging itself? So, in this podcast, I want to move past the hype. We are going to bridge the gap between what works in a lab and what actually works in the human body. We will discuss in details the hidden risks of keeping your body in the quote growth mode, where building big muscles today might come at a cost later. And we are going to rank every anti-aging tool out there so you know what to prioritize. So let's begin with a very key topic, and that's lifespan versus health span. So lifespan is the total time you are alive, birth to death. Simple. A health span is a different animal. It's the time that you are alive in a state of relatively good health and function. And that's where things immediately get messy because the scientific literature doesn't fully agree on a single standardized definition or a single standardized way to measure it. The problem is that the word health span is used by everyone to sell everything, but they all measure it differently. This is the part you need to watch out for, because it's very easy for a company or health guru to claim that they are extending your health span just because they moved one single number in your blood work. But moving a number on a page doesn't always change your life. Now think of it like a car. You can paint the car so it looks brand new, or you can cut the wire to the check engine light so it stops glowing, but that doesn't mean that the engine is actually fixed. Shifting a lab result is just the proxy. True health span isn't a lab score. It's a real world function. Can you still get up off the floor without help? Can you carry your own groceries? Can you think clearly and remember your grandkids' names? If an intervention moves a biomarker but doesn't actually keep you independent and capable, it isn't extending health span. It's just the biomarker theater. So when you hear health span, the first question should be, define it. Are you talking about lab results, or are you talking about how I will actually function when I'm 85? Now, historically, this debate overlaps with a concept called compression of morbidity. That's a fancy way of saying we want to squish the period of being sick into the smallest possible window at the end of life. Think of it like timeline. Let's call it scenarios A and B. So in scenario A, this is what we often see today. You live to 85, but the last 15 years are a slow slide. You are dealing with multiple diseases. You are on 10 different pills, and your world is getting smaller every day. So the timeline of your sickness is basically expanded. Now, scenario B is the goal of longevity. You live to the same 85 or maybe even 90, but you stay robust, sharp, and active until the very end. Then you decline very quickly over a matter of weeks or months rather than decades. Now in scenario B, you have compressed the time you spend being ill. You have delayed the onset of chronic disease so much that it simply doesn't have time to steal your life away before the clock runs out. Unfortunately, the problems that we are facing now is that we aren't seeing this, quote, squish happening consistently. Instead of people staying healthy longer, we are seeing longer lives with a massive tail of chronic disease. We are living longer, but we are spending more of those extra years in hospital beds or waiting rooms. So the goal of this entire 4-hour deep dive isn't just to not die. It's to figure out how to push the line of disability so far to the right as possible so that your health span is almost matching your lifespan. Now let's talk about prevention versus optimization versus intervention. People throw these words around like they mean the same thing, but they don't. To understand where you should be spending your time and money, you have to know which game you are playing. Think of it like traffic light. Prevention is the green light. This is about stopping a wreck before it happens. It's reducing the risk of a bad outcome, basically, like heart disease or cancer, before there is any sign of trouble. The goal here is simple: stay in the green. If we can delay the start of a disease by 10 or 20 years, that's a massive win for your longevity. Now let's talk about optimization. Optimization is the, quote, turbo button. It's way different concept. Optimization isn't about not being sick. It's about seeing how well your body can actually perform while you are healthy. It's not just about how many hours you sleep. It's about improving the sleep quality so you wake up sharper. It's not just about walking every day. It's about building elite level strength and fitness. You are not fixing a problem in this stage where you are optimizing. You are actually raising the ceiling on what your body can do today so that you have more reserves for tomorrow. Now, talking about intervention, this is the red light. This is what we do when the wreck already happened or is starting to happen. This is medical treatment. It's when a disease is already present and we have to step in to reverse the damage, treat the symptoms, or at the very least, slow down the slide. So why does this distinction really matter? Well, because a lot of the longevity gurus are trying to sell you optimization, such as fancy supplement to feel more energetic, and tell you it's prevention. For example, it will stop you from getting cancer, right? Or help you prevent cancer. Well, if you spend all your money on the turbo buttons, right, the optimization stage, but you ignore the green light, the basics, like blood pressure, smoking, you are just putting a high-performance engine in a car with no brakes. Now, let's talk about why diet and exercise alone no longer satisfies people as an answer to healthy lifestyle or healthy lifespan. You've probably seen this yourself. Someone does everything right. They eat their salad, they hit the gym, and they still get hit with a major health crisis in their 60s. The reason people are looking beyond diet and exercise is that they've realized that those are only maintenance. Think of your body like a house. Diet and exercise are like cleaning the floors, painting the walls. They make the house look great and keep it pleasant to live in. But again, it's what's happening underneath the floorboards. It's the foundation cracking, the pipes rusting, and the wiring fraying. For a long time, doctors just waited for the pipe to burst, for you to have a heart attack or get a cancer diagnosis, and then they tried to patch it up. We call that playing whack-a-mole. You fix one problem, and 3 months later, the roof starts leaking somewhere else. But there has been a massive shift in science. We have stopped looking at these diseases as a separate random events. We have realized that all of them have the same root cause, the biology of aging. If you look at the 12 hallmarks of aging or the 12 ways the house falls apart, to give you a better analogy, you see things like zombie cells and the messed up energy factories. Well, these are the mechanism upstream of every major disease. The legitimate question people are asking now is, if the foundation is the problem, why are we only focusing on the paint job? Why aren't we fixing the foundation? But here is the real warning. Just because we know that the foundation is cracking, it doesn't mean that we have tools to fix it yet. Now, moving from I see the crack to, oh, I've got a pill that safely fixes it is a massive leap. So let's set the frame for the rest of this talk and set some rules. Number one, we are going to be very honest about the data. A lot of what you hear online works in 2-year-old mouse, but it hasn't been proven in a 60-year-old human. Number two, we are looking for foundation fixes, not just paint jobs. We want to know what actually changes the trajectory of our life, not just our lab scores, right? Number three, we are going to be absolutely ruthless with the evidence. If it's just a promising theory with no human proof, I'm going to tell you exactly that. So the fact that health span and lifespan gap is widening is exactly why people are hungry for answers. But we have to be honest. Hunger doesn't create evidence. So the questions we are answering today isn't, can we live to 120? The real question is, how do we stop the last decade of our lives from being a slow slide into disability? And what tools actually have the human proof to get us there? So before we jump into the first segment, let's be very clear about what we mean by longevity. It usually boils down to 3 different goals. 1, not dying early from things that we can prevent, right? Like heart attacks at 55. Number 2, staying capable, physically and mentally, for as long as possible. And number 3, the extreme longevity, pushing the absolute limits of the human lifespan. Now, these 3 goals overlap, but the science behind them is not equal. In the next segment, we are going to build a map. We will separate what is solid from what is plausible, and we will be ruthless about calling out the speculative storytelling that is being dressed up as a science. Now, if you remember nothing else from these first 10 minutes or so, remember this: lifespan is just the number of years you are alive. Health span is how long you stay in the game. Now, they are not the same things, and the gap between them is huge. And our goal today is to close it. So let's talk about a problem with the surface level evidence. Basically the stuff like eat better and move more. The advice isn't wrong, but it's dangerously incomplete. It fails people basically in 2 ways. First, it turns a massive biological puzzle into a simple slogan. Second, it assumes that because something works for the average person in a study, it's going to work for you too. And that's where the confusion starts. So why eat better, move more is incomplete? Well, because longevity isn't just one thing. It's a stack of systems that all have to work together. Your heart, your brain, your immune system, and your muscles. When you just eat better, you are just simply targeting one of those. So here is what the standard advice misses. Number 1, your starting point. A person who is already dealing with insulin resistance or high blood pressure is playing a completely different game than someone who isn't. You can't use a general map if you don't know where you are starting from, right? The second is the invisible factor. You can have a perfect diet, but if you have a chronic sleep apnea, high stress, or you are breathing polluted air, those invisible hits are still draining your health battery every day. 3. The measurement gap. Now, most diet studies rely on people writing down what they ate 2-3 weeks ago. Now, we know that's notoriously inaccurate. So we are building massive conclusions on very noisy data. And number 4, the time problem. Longevity is a game of decades, but most of the, quote, hacks that people try are only measured in weeks. That creates quite false sense of confidence. So the trap and the biggest mistake that people make is thinking that diet and exercise are a single thing. But they aren't. They are broad categories with millions of variables. Think about it this way. 2 people can say, we are eating healthy. One is eating high protein and plant diet. The other is eating low-fat processed snacks. 2 people can say they are exercising. One is walking the dog, and the other is doing high-intensity intervals and heavy lifting. They are using the same words, but their bodies are experiencing 10 completely different physiological realities. So when someone tells you this is the best diet for longevity, your response should be best for whom and based on what starting point. If we don't get specific, we are just guessing. Now, let's talk about the dangers of extrapolating population advice to individuals, or the average versus you version. This is the part that really breaks people's brains, because the average effect in a study is almost never the effect you should expect for yourself. This is not just an opinion, but it's a statistical fact. Think about it this way. If you took 1 million men and measured them and created a suit based on the average height, average waist, and average arm length, that suit would fit exactly 0 people perfectly. Now, medicine does exactly the same thing. We take a group of people, see what works for the majority, and then hand that out as a rule. But in the scientific literature, there is a concept called the variation in response, meaning that while a drug or diet might help the group average, it could do nothing for you, or it could even be harmful. And I can tell you from personal experience that there are a couple things that I have tried, one supplement and one even food, and it was completely screwing up with my heart rate variability. One of them actually made me super overstimulated, and it was meant to be the greatest thing for cardiovascular system and general health. I'm gonna talk about it maybe later on more, but just an example that I can tell you from personal experience. Yes, that does happen. So another example is to look at the cookie test, right? If you want something more general and specific. Looking at the blood sugar after we eat a cookie, for example, right? So there was a landmark study in the journal Cell and later work by project called Zoe. They gave different people the exactly same meal, sometimes even identical twins, and watched their blood sugar level. The results were shocking. 2 people can eat exactly the same cookie, and one person's blood sugar stays perfectly flat while the other person spikes into super high level. Now, their bodies were processing the same fuel in 2 completely different ways. The takeaway for longevity is that this is why the blanket advice fails so many people. If we can eat the same healthy meal and have totally different internal interaction, then the general diet plan is only going to be, quote, mostly right for some people and individually wrong for lots of other people. So this is where the concept of N of 1 trial comes in. It's basically a fancy way of saying you have to be the scientist of your own body. Now, I want to be careful here. Precision nutrition isn't magic, and we don't have all the answers yet. And these models aren't perfect. But the lesson for you is simple. Stop assuming that because some guru or internet said a specific food is a superfood, it's doing something good for your biology. You have to look at your own data, your own blood work, and your own response, just like I did, to know if the strategy is actually moving you towards longevity or just taking up space on your plate, or worse, making you feel worse. Now let's look at exercise. It pretty much follows the exact same rules as the quote cookie test that we just talked about. We have been told for decades that exercise is medicine, but we forget that every person needs a different prescription. So there's a family workout story that I'm gonna give you, and it's actually based on a study. There was a major study called the Heritage Family Study that proved this very beautifully. Researchers basically took hundreds of people from different families and put them on exactly the same strict controlled cardio program for 20 weeks. Now, if exercise worked the same for everyone, they all should have seen the same improvement. But they didn't. Some people saw their fitness, measured as VO2 max, explode by 50%. Others did every single workout to the letter and saw zero improvement in their cardio fitness. So let's talk about a trap of responders versus non-responders. Now I want to be very careful here. This does not mean that those people were lazy or that the exercise is useless for them. It just means the benefits were hiding in different places. Think about it like this. For person A, the endurance training might fix their blood pressure and blood sugar. For person B, that same running program might do nothing for their blood sugar, but it might drastically improve their deep sleep or mental health. Now, for person C, running might actually lead to injury and burnout. And what they actually need to preserve their longevity was heavy lifting and resistance training. So the takeaway is that when someone says just exercise and it fixes everything, the only correct answer is what type of exercise, how much, and what results are we looking for in me. If you have been running for years and your blood markers aren't improving, you don't really need to work harder at running. You might just need a different, quote, drug, right? So the population advice doesn't capture this nuance, and it really leads to the same failure mode, which is that people either blame themselves for not doing it right, or they decide that the whole concept of health is just one big lie. While the truth is, the workout that worked for your neighbor might be the wrong prescription for you. You have to match the training to the specific biological goal that you want to achieve. So let's tackle the elephant in the room. Why all the smart people in the longevity field disagree with each other? So for example, when one expert tells you to fast for 3 days and another one says fasting is dangerous, it's easy to assume that someone is lying or being incompetent. But in reality, medicine is hardly ever about facts versus lies. It's about interpretation. So if you want the honest truth on why the experts are constantly at each other's throat, it usually comes down to these 5 lenses. So the lens number 1, the good evidence. One scientist look at the plausible mechanism, which means how a molecule works in a lab dish, and says, This is enough evidence for me to start taking it now. Another scientist says, I don't care how it works in a dish. Show me a 20-year human trial with a placebo group. So longevity trials are brutally hard to do. You can't just lock humans in a room for 40 years to see when they die. Because of that, you get two camps of people. The act now camp and the wait for proof camp. Both are acting in good faith, they just have different standards. Now, the lens number 2 is the lens of risk tolerance. This is about how much upside you want versus how much harm are you willing to risk. So the conservative lens is, if you don't know the long-term side effects, don't touch it, right? The more aggressive lens is, aging is 100% fatal. I will take an uncertainty today for a potential 10-year gain tomorrow. So when you hear experts argue, they aren't arguing about the data. They are usually arguing about how much risk is acceptable. Now, the third lens is the false positive lens. And there is a famous scientific paper titled, Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. So in the longevity world, we have a perfect storm for this problem. We have thousands of biomarkers and public audience that rewards confident storytelling. Smart people disagree because some of them are simply more skeptical. They know that a fancy study today often disappears tomorrow when someone tries to replicate it. Now, the lens number 4 is the biomarker trap. This is a huge one. For example, expert A sees your inflammation markers drop, fasting insulin improve, LDL change, and your epigenetic clock shift, basically showing that you are aging slower, and says you have successfully slowed aging, while expert B says, who cares? Show me that you have actually reduced your risk of dementia or heart attack. So this is the difference between a surrogate or a number on a page and an outcome. In other words, how long do you live? The disagreement here is often just a fight over whether the lab score actually translates to longer life. Now, the lens number 5 is the public health versus individual lens. Now, government guidelines are built to be broadly safe for 300 million people, right? They have to worry about the lowest common denominator and the cost to the system. But, quote, broadly safe is not the same as optimal for a specific person with specific constraints. You are not the 300 million people. You might have a specific genetic risk or a specific goal that makes the general guideline wrong for you. An expert focused on public health will always disagree with an expert focused on individual biohacking because they are solving two completely different problems. So the takeaway, when you hear two experts disagreeing, stop asking who is right and start asking which lens are they looking through. Once you understand their perspective, you can decide which one matches your goals and your risk tolerance. Alright, so for the last 10 minutes of this opening block, we need a way to actually think about aging that makes sense. Without a central map, you are just basically guessing. We need a way of bouncing between disconnected headlines. One day saying there's a new supplement study, the next day there is some kind of a random biomarker or paper about a mouse, right? You never really know what any of it actually means for your life. So the model that scientists actually use to make the sense of this is the one that fits the best evidence that we have. And it's to look at aging as three things happening at the exactly same time. So number one, damage accumulation. Number 2, loss of resilience. And number 3, dysregulated repair and maintenance. And I will discuss each of them in more details. Now, these 3 pillars, the damage, resilience, and repair, they aren't separate boxes, right? They overlap and they feed into each other. So there is no single one tells the whole story, but together they give us a map that we can actually use. If a longevity hack isn't fixing one of these 3 things, it's probably not worth your time. So let's start with the first part, and that's aging as damage accumulation. So one of the biggest myths about aging is that our body has some kind of a suicide program or a clock that's counting down to 0. But that's not how it works. From evolutionary standpoint, your body is a high-performance machine that's designed for one thing: getting you to the finish line of the reproductive age in peak condition. So to do that, your biology makes cold trade-off. It has a limited budget of energy and resources. It spends almost everything on growth and performance right now and only spends just enough on repairs to keep the wheels from falling off before you have passed on your genes. This is called the disposable soma theory. Essentially, your body isn't built to last forever. It's built to be good enough for the first few decades. Aging is simply the biological debt that starts coming due when the maintenance budget can no longer keep up with the daily wear and tear. So let's talk about systemic audit, right? I call it the 12 hallmarks. When we talk about damage, it isn't just one thing. In 2023, scientists updated a framework called Hallmarks of Aging. Think of this as 12-point inspection of a failing building. These aren't just random problems, they are interconnected glitches in the system. So let's talk about them. First one, DNA typos, the genomic instability, to say it with a fancy term. Basically, your cellular instruction manual gets smudged, and the more typos you have, the more likely cell is to stop working or turn into a tumor. The next one is telomere shortening. Telomeres are the protective end caps on your DNA. Every time cell divides, the cap gets a little shorter. Eventually, the cap is gone. The DNA frays and the cell can no longer divide. Next one would be the epigenetic scrambling. Now, if DNA is the hard drive, the epigenetics is the software. And over time, the software gets buggy. The body forgets which gene should be turned on and which should be turned off. The next one is protein clumping. Now, your cells are filled with protein machinery. When they misfold or clump together like a sticky engine, they create biological trash that the cells just can't get rid of. Now, next one is mitochondrial decay. Now, your cellular batteries, the mitochondria, right, starts leaking. They become less efficient at making energy and start spitting out exhaust, oxidative stress. That damages everything nearby. Lastly, the zombie cells, the senescents. These are cells that should have died, but they didn't. They sit there refusing to work and they just scream out inflammatory signals that irritate and damage every healthy cells around them. So here is the practical takeaway. The list of 12 hallmarks is a map. It's not a territory. Just because we can name telomere shortening doesn't mean that taking a supplement to fix it actually makes you live longer. Your body is incredibly good at compensating. You can have protein clumping or mitochondrial decay happening right now and feel 100% fine. This is the hidden face of aging. The damage accumulates silently in the background until the system finally runs out of ways to hide the cracks. That's when the check engine light finally stays on. And that brings us to the second pillar. Now, this second pillar, loss of resilience, is perhaps the most clinically intuitive way to understand the aging process. While damage is about the trash piling up in the house, resilience is about how quickly you can clean it up and get back to normal after a storm hits. Meaning, you simply do not bounce back the way you used to. You catch a standard viral infection and the recovery drags on for 10 days instead of 3 days as it used to. You pull all-nighter and the cognitive hangover lingers for 48 hours. Now you miss 2 weeks of training and you notice your cardiovascular capacity drops significantly faster than it did a decade ago, right? So in clinical terms, we don't treat the resilience as sort of the vibe or psychological state. We treat it as homeostatic capacity, a measurable property of how biological system returns to its baseline after being pushed off center by a stressor. So when we analyze large-scale physiological data, we see that aging isn't straight line. It's a change in recovery dynamic. Now you can think of your physiology like a high tension spring. In your 20s, that spring is incredibly tight. You pull it and it snaps back to zero instantly. As we age, that spring becomes plastic. It stretches, it deforms, and it takes longer and longer to return to its original shape. And eventually the spring loses its snap entirely, right? Research into human lifespan suggests that this slowing down of our internal reset button is actually one of the primary limiting the factors of how long we can survive. It's not necessarily that a single disease kills us. It's that our system becomes so slow to respond to any stressor, be it injury, temperature spike, or blood sugar surge, that the instability eventually becomes permanent. Now, let's talk about clinical reserves versus normal labs. Geriatric medicine has understood this for decades through the concept of physiological reserve. This is your buffer zone. Young system has massive reserve. You can abuse it, starve it, or overwork it, and it barely breaks a sweat because the buffer is so deep. Middle-aged system can still compensate. On the surface, you look and feel fine, but the buffer is physically smaller. You are basically redlining the engine just to maintain a normal appearance. Now, that's very different from older system. Older system often looks stable at baseline, meaning your labs look fine while you are sitting still. But the moment a stressor shows up, the fragility is exposed. The system has zero margin for error. Well, and this is exactly where most people get misled by the longevity advice. A lot of content focuses on having good baseline numbers today, like perfect resting heart rate or clean blood panel. Those are important, but they are not the same thing as high resilience. You can have perfectly normal labs while at rest and still have dangerously low physiological reserve. Being stable while sitting on a couch is not the same thing as being robust under pressure. Now let's talk about the third pillar, aging as dysregulated repair system. Now this third pillar is where the model moves from passive wear and tear idea to functional breakdown of the system. It's not just that your body is getting hit with a damage, it's that the janitorial crew hired to clean up the damage has started making mistakes. They are either missing the trash, showing up late, or in some cases, accidentally setting the building on fire while trying to fix a leak. Now, from engineering perspective, your body isn't designed for infinite survival. It has a maintenance budget. As we age, the body stops investing in high-quality repair and starts doing patch job. It's the biological version of using duct tape on a leaking pipe instead of replacing the plumbing. Now, this isn't suicide program. It's just the natural result of body prioritizing growth and reproduction over long-term upkeep. So let's talk a little bit more about the breakdown of the cleaning crew. When we talk about repair systems, we are looking at few critical areas that start to drift. So first one is the quality control, right? You may have heard about autophagy and DNA repair. Here your cells have basically a process called autophagy, literally self-eating. It's how the cell recycles broken parts. When this slows down, the quote biological junk or the misfolded proteins clutters the cell, right? Now at the same time, the machinery that fixes the DNA quote typos starts missing errors. Now the second part is the security team, right? The immune system. This is the most visible part of aging. As we age, the immune system undergoes two related failures. One is immunosenescence. This is the police force getting tired. They become less effective at spotting new threats like viruses or identifying the zombie cells that we talked about that need to be cleared out. Second is the inflammaging. This is systemic stress. It's a low-grade, constant simmer of inflammation. The immune system isn't fighting a specific fire. It's just smoldering everywhere throughout the body at all time. This chronic background heat eventually starts damaging healthy tissues. Now, we need to differentiate between signal versus noise. The key word here is dysregulation, right? So in a young body, these systems are precise. If there is an injury, the body sends an inflammatory signal, fixes it, and turns the signal off. In aging body, the signal to noise ratio flips. The signal stays on when they should be actually off, and they stay quiet when they should be loud. So you end up with a system that is overreacting to nothing, basically causing chronic pain or stiff joints, and underreacting to actual threats like slow-growing tumor or new infection that can go undetected. So now we have sort of this united map, right? When we look at these three pillars together, we have more complete picture. Number one, we have damage accumulation, which is basically the trash is piling up. Two, we are losing the resilience. The buffer is gone and you can't handle crisis. And three is the dysregulation repair. The janitor is drunk and the security guards are hallucinating. In other words, aging isn't just one of these things. It is the combination of all three feeding into each other. If we want to talk about longevity, we aren't just talking about a pill. We are talking about how we can help the body manage its trash, widen its buffer, and clean up the signal to noise ratio. So why does this matter for our talk? Well, every single longevity intervention that we are going to discuss today is trying to do one of the three things: reduce the damage being generated, enhance the quality of your internal repairs, or improve your resilience, your reserve, and recovery speed. The problem is that in humans, we don't have a camera small enough to watch DNA repair or mitochondrial leak in real time. Instead, we use proxies, things like blood markers, imaging, physical tests. The biggest mistake people make in this space is chasing these proxies. They treat a better number on a lab report as if it's the same thing as fixing the deep system. As we move forward, we are going to ask, are we just moving a needle on a dashboard, or are we actually changing the health of the engine? So before we close this intro, I want to give you a quick filing system for the hallmarks of aging. In 2013, scientists grouped these problems into 9 categories. By 2023, they expanded it to 12 to include things like chronic inflammation and gut health, dysbiosis. You don't need to memorize all 12, but you should understand how they are categorized. So number 1, the primary damage. These are the original signs of aging, things like DNA damage, genomic instability, and the fading blueprint, the epigenetic changes. The second one is failed responses. These are your body's attempts to fix things that eventually backfire, like the zombie cells, the senescence we talked about earlier. And the last one is the systemic meltdown. These are the big picture results, like chronic background inflammation that affects every organ at once. So the geroscience bet is the idea that if we can target these upstream biological failures, we might be able to delay or prevent multiple diseases at once, like heart disease, dementia, and cancer, rather than playing whack-a-mole with each one as it shows up. If I had to summarize this entire opening block in one sentence, it's this. Aging happens when your system piles up biological damage while simultaneously losing the ability to repair it cleanly or recover from it quickly. And that is our framework. As we move out of this introduction, we are going to be ruthless. We are going to separate high confidence interventions from the early stage ideas that only worked in a mouse, and we are going to distinguish between biomarker theater and real evidence.